Welcome to the Steel Creek Explorer. I'm your host, Jeremy Stout, and today we take you into Steel Creek Park's Hidden History, Part 2. If you remember, on the last episode, we took you into the park in search of some hidden history. Not the things that you find in the books necessarily, not the things that were written down for their deep historical significance at the time, but little aspects of everyday life in Steel Creek Park and in Bristol that you can find if you know where to look. Sometimes the landscape just doesn't lay quite right, or the underlying geology would lead you to think that there shouldn't be a flat spot here, but maybe there is. That's the kind of history that we're looking for. The kind that's buried, the kind that you sort of have to use your imagination a little bit to find. So today we're going to continue that. This is Hidden History Part 2, and we have decided to go back to the archives. We've pulled out the 1938 USGS, that's the United States Geological Survey, topographic map. So this is a map that's almost 100 years old, and let's go to it and see what we can recognize. So here we are at the 1938 United States Geological Survey topographic map. This is very similar to the topo maps that the USGS still puts out today. But again, this is 1938. This is almost 100 years ago. And at first glance, you might notice how similar to modern day Bristol it looks. You start to see this highway to the north of Steel Creek Park that runs right where Interstate 81 runs today. This is not Interstate 81. It predates I-81. But it is where that road would be. You look to the south of the park, you find a road that's today's Edgemont Avenue and Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. You find Glidwood Cemetery, it's still around today. Haynesfield School, sitting right where Haynesfield School is today. If we were to go northeast, you would find the Fairmount community. If we were to go a little bit further up, you would find State Street. There's King College over here. Lots of things that we recognize. But when you start to look closer at the map, that's where the similarities really begin to end. So right off the bat, you see this great big wilderness area. This is what's going to become Steel Creek Park. It's not Steel Creek Park when this map was drafted. And there's something that is glaringly absent on this map. If you're familiar with looking at Steel Creek Park from above, then you notice that something is missing from this area. The lake. Of course, our lake, like almost all lakes in Tennessee, is man-made, and our lake was completed in the early 1960s. So this map predates our lake by over 30 years. So when you start to look, you also notice, oh, okay, well, we have a road that goes around the park area here, but this map shows a road that bisects the park, goes right down the middle of where the lake sits today. You also notice these little black squares on the map are dwellings, they're buildings. And so if you look in today's lake bed on the 1938 map, you find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 structures, all underneath where the lake sits now. So this map gives us a hint that there might be some artifacts underneath the lake if we know where to look, and this map points us to where we might be able to find them. That's not where we're going to go today. We don't have an underwater camera vehicle that can search the lake for us. Maybe that'll be on the next episode. Where we're going to go today is some of this farmland. These areas that were agricultural, and we're going to see if we can find some evidence of some of the folks that used to keep livestock and actively farm the peripheral areas of the park. So let's get on out there and see what we can find. Well, here we are off of any of the official trails in Steele Creek Park, and here we are at a standing, unique structure that ties in the park's history, maybe with some of the early human history. This is a really fascinating and enigmatic block structure sitting abandoned right here on the outskirts of Steele Creek Park. So what is this mysterious building? The truth is, I don't know for certain, but I do have a hypothesis on what this thing might be. There are some things we can say right out of the gate. First off, that this is a pretty old structure. This is not something that was built in the last 10, 20, 30, even 50 or 60 years. This is probably a little structure that's going on 100 or more years old. When we start to look at that time of Steele Creek Park, we know that there were some significant logging activities that were happening not far from where we are. We also know that in the 1930s, Civilian Conservation Camp Company 420 was in the park, and they were developing parts of what would later become the Stacy Grayson Memorial at Steele Creek Park. Both of those activities make reference to munitions sheds that would have been in the park. These would have been areas to keep dynamite dry and keep it safe. Also keep it away from the camp, keep it away from where people are working, where it might be kept safe. Now that's a perfectly reasonable hypothesis. At first, when I was clued in to the existence of this structure, I thought it was something different from that. I thought it might be just as simple as a spring house. The ground right inside is very soggy. It holds water year-round. But upon further investigation, I think it's safe to say that this is probably not a spring house, and this likely is something designed for storing munitions. So what's the first piece of evidence we have? The composition. This thing is not built out of pole sticks and sheet metal. No, this thing is built out of the native stone that comes right out of the hillside. Big blocks of shale native to the park. This stuff is heavy. This is a dense rock. Even a rock that's just, a foot cubed would weigh a couple of 100 pounds. This stuff is very, very dense. Furthermore, we see evidence of where the door would sit on this structure. The door is gone, but we find these large steel or iron carriage bolts holding this thing closed in multiple locations. This is not a door that you would put on a spring house. This is a door that you intend to keep locked, and this is a door that is very much reinforced. So that's our first clue that this might have been for something a little bit more interesting than a spring coming out of the ground. All right, what's here? Looks like we don't have to go far. There's definitely a piece of sheet metal here. And let's see, here's the boundaries. Okay, so whatever this was has a pretty big iron steel handle on it. It's a large piece of metal. This could very well be a piece of that reinforced door that attached to the side or to the front of this this building. It's right here, man. Maybe not. This doesn't have any holes that would match up to those big carriage bolts that are sticking out. But this could have been, it could have been a double layered door or more, which would make sense if it's a blast door or a fire door. This would very likely be a piece of that door. The rest of it may be close by around here as well. What? What's that? Let's go check it out. This is so cool. When I first saw this from a distance, I thought it looked like a cave. It might be a natural cave in the hillside, but then as you get closer up, you realize very quickly that this is a human-built structure, and it resembles the entryway to a tomb or some kind of ancient ruins. But no, it's not that. When you look at it closely, you realize that it is also built out of these same blocks of severe shale that our little nearby blockhouse was built off. We've got some of the same mortar work that's filling in the same crevices. And we also find this metal arm that had this place to attach to a little metal loop. And this was intended to be locked. In fact, as I look at the dimensions of this, this might even be where that square-shaped piece of door that I thought was from the door to that other structure may have actually gone to this thing. So what is this? Well, this adds further evidence that that structure a little down the hill from where we are now might have been a munitions shed, because as you might be able to intuitively figure out, when you store munitions, you didn't store the blasting caps and the other associated hardware in the same place. That makes sense, right? You don't store the things that make the things go boom with the things that go boom. You put those somewhere else for safekeeping. Well, this right here is just about the right size and dimensions to hold the blasting caps and associated hardware for the amount of dynamite and other munitions that might be in that shed down below. The question is, why did they put it up here? Putting it away from the shed, I understand, but why put it so inaccessible from the site where it would be used? Maybe they had a better trail or road than we got up to here from today. Thanks for coming along with me as we continued our exploration of some of the park's hidden history. We found a lot of really cool things. Finding that munitions shed and the possible site for where its blast caps might have been stored is really neat. That's a piece of history that you may not find in a lot of the history books, but it's integral to the formation and the early days of Steele Creek Park. So maybe if you remember, back in the last episode at the very beginning, I introduced you to this interesting object that we found in the creek, in Mill Creek, right inside Steele Creek Park. And I said, maybe we'll even identify what this thing is. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, we still haven't identified what this mysterious object is. We know that it's old. We also can tell that it is made probably out of some kind of ceramic, but it also has a metallic center. We've heard a couple of competing hypotheses. One is that this is a very antique button, maybe off of a man's dress coat or something. Or another possibility is that it could be the wheel off of a child's toy. But whatever it is, it's old and it was an interesting find, and it tells us a little piece about the life of some of the first Bristolians. So one thing I would like to mention, if you find any artifacts in any of our city parks, remember that natural and historical objects are protected in the city of Bristol, Tennessee, and that's true for most other places where you go as well, in the state parks and other places. So make sure that if you find something interesting, report it to the authorities for that site, because we would love to know about it. None of us knows as much as all of us, and none of us see as much as all of us. So whether you're here to explore some hidden history found in this acre, or you're here to explore some of the 2,300 acres, be sure to come to Steel Creek Park, because that's where you can be the explorer.